Greetings and warm welcome, dear audience. Happy weekend. And here we are again. Again, we've been facing a lot of technical issues lately. And yesterday I had problem with my Wi-Fi here, so I couldn't. We couldn't proceed. So we are having it today. So thank you for your time and your support. Today we will continue. In welcoming our Ambassador Professor Dr. Rania Lampu to present this professional masterclass on understanding research. Today is our lecture number 6 actually, understanding research paradigm part 2. Yeah, last week we had part 1, now it's part 2. For this, I would like to invite Dr. Rania to take the floor. Dr. Rania?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Dr. Estera.
Yeah, good afternoon.
I'm very happy every time we conduct a new session, especially on research. All the sessions are very valuable, and precious, especially for beginners and those who want to get engaged in research work, original research work. So thank you very much for giving this opportunity to conduct together the research series. And last time, we approached the research paradigms. So we explained how these paradigms play a crucial role in shaping real-world research. And we said that each paradigm, positivism, interpretivism, critical theory, pragmatism, carries its own assumptions about reality. Reality means ontology, about knowledge. This is what we call epistemology and methodology. Understanding these paradigms' practical implications today, this will help researchers align their approach with their objectives, their audience, and context. We're going to explore all these practical implications of research paradigm because, in fact, the richness of real-world research often comes from blending these perspectives, using multiple approaches to address the challenges we face. So the paradigm we choose shapes not only our methods, but the impact of our findings on society. Because research paradigm offers a unique perspective and framework for understanding the world around us. And what has become clear is that these paradigms are not theoretical constructs. They have real, tangible implications of how we approach research in the real world. So whether we're working in healthcare or education or social sciences or any other field, these paradigms adopt, the paradigms that we adopt shape how we collect data, how we analyze it, and ultimately how we apply our findings to solve real-world problems. Before starting sharing, we will say that as scholars, as researchers and practitioners, we have the responsibility to be conscious of the paradigms we choose and how they influence not only our findings, but the broader social impact of our work. Why? Because our research has the power to shape policies, to change lives, and contribute to a more just and equitable world. So the frameworks we use, whether they emphasize objectivity or subjectivity or social justice, will guide the way we contribute to this mission. So now I'm going to share my presentation.
So, Dr. Rania, are we doing the aspect of application of?
We explain some. We will illustrate some examples in healthcare sector and business, according to each research paradigm.
Okay. Thank you.
So is it visible now?
Yeah, you already uploaded. Let me add to the stage.
Is it fine now? Can you see the PowerPoint? It's not ready yet?
I can see your screen, but can you try moving? Yeah, it's moving. It's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
So, the real-world research paradigms serve as a foundational frameworks that guide the methodologies, assumptions, and approaches that researchers use to explore and understand phenomena. Each paradigm provides a specific worldview, as we said in the previous session, shaping how research questions are framed, how data is collected and analyzed, and how conclusions are drawn. So the practical applications of real-world research are significant because they influence not only the design of our study, but also how findings are interpreted and applied in practice. So positivism, we mentioned before that it focuses on quantifiable data, which is considered unbiased and replicable. So what would be the practical implications of this? That the emphasis is on objectivity. Positivist research focuses on quantifiable data, what would be clinical trials, economics, or epidemiology. The use of structured methods. Researchers can use structured methodologies like randomized controlled trials, surveys with standardized questions, statistical analysis, and this often leads to generalizable and predictive findings. Actually, one limitation of this paradigm is that it may overlook the complexities of human experiences and social contexts, leading to oversimplified, we could say, conclusions in fields like social sciences or humanities. We mentioned last time about interpretivist paradigm, which actually focuses on understanding the subjective meanings and experiences, and the practical application have to do with context, because this is valuable in fields where understanding individual perspectives and social context is critical. In education, for example, or in anthropology, in healthcare, organizational studies, it helps generate in-depth analysis into complex human behaviors and motivations. So here, practically, researchers can use interviews, case studies, ethnographies, and participant observations. The research is typically, of course, more flexible than the other one, more adaptive to emerging patterns. And interpretivism leads to rich narrative descriptions that provide depth, may not be easily generalizable because it prioritizes depth over breadth, allowing for a deeper understanding of specific groups of situations. And this paradigm recognizes the researcher's influence on the study and often embraces the researcher's role as a part of the interpretative process. So this might challenge the idea of complete objectivity, especially in practical fields like business, decision-making, or healthcare. The critical paradigm that we mentioned last time, which is associated usually with transformative goals, here, in fields like education or sociology and gender studies, the critical paradigm is used to examine and address inequalities, systemic barriers, and injustices. So researchers here aim not only to understand the world, but to transform it. So researchers often engage. What they do, they engage participants in the research process, advocating for participatory methods that give marginalized voices agency. The practical goal is to empower communities and enact change through policy, education, or activism. And critical research often challenges existing power structures and advocates for equity, so it can have direct implications for social policies such as gender equality or healthcare sector and human rights. And the pragmatism paradigm, we said last time that it combines both qualitative and quantitative methods to find solutions to practical problems. So what are the practical applications here is that we can use it in real-world research where the focus is on solving practical problems rather than adhering to a specific philosophical approach. So fields like engineering, for example, or public policy often rely on this paradigm, healthcare also, to generate actionable solutions. So here, researchers are free to use whatever methods best answer the research question, whether qualitative or quantitative or mixed. For example, a healthcare study might use surveys to gather quantitative data and interviews for qualitative insights. So flexibility in methodology. A pragmatic research also focuses on practical outcomes and real-world applications. So the results are directly applicable to decision-making or practice, making this paradigm particularly useful in industries seeking to improve processes, products, or services. And By combining different methodologies, pragmatism allows for a comprehensive approach that integrates both empirical data and contextual understanding. And the post-positive paradigm, because here post-positivism actually builds on positivism. It recognizes, it acknowledges the complexity of reality and the limits of human knowledge. This is the difference. And it accepts that knowledge is not entirely objective, like positivism, but research for the post-positive paradigm can only approximate the truth, emphasizing both quantitative and qualitative methods. So here, we can say that practically this is usual, it is applied in scientific disciplines that require a high level of rigor, such as environmental science, for example, or public health or education. So it has a rigorous yet flexible approach. It allows for the use of hypothesis and empirical testing while acknowledging the influence of context and the limitations of objectivity. And here, researchers adopt a critical perspective on their findings, recognizing that knowledge is probabilistic and not absolute. This influences the way results are reported, often with more caution regarding generalizability and certainty. And very important, what we call triangulation. Post-positivist researchers often use triangulation. What is triangulation? Is the combination of multiple methods or sources of data to provide a more comprehensive understanding of the research problem. And we have mentioned also the constructivist paradigm, which actually argues that reality is socially constructed through human interactions and experiences, that knowledge is created through understanding subjective meanings and is context-dependent. It's often associated with qualitative methods, and here the focus is on lived experience, so it's useful for fields like psychology or sociology and education also, where understanding individuals' personal experiences and the meaning they assign to them is critical for research. Now, the context-specific insights. Why? Because the findings here are often rich in context because they provide deep insights into specific cultural social groups. This can inform practices like, for example, patient-centered care in healthcare or culturally sensitive educational interventions. And the collaboration here, researchers often engage with participants as co-creators of knowledge, allowing for collaborative inquiry that respects the perspectives of participants and acknowledges multiple realities. So we mentioned that the choice of paradigm directly influences the research methods. So positive approach, for example, will favor control experiment surveys, while interpretivist approach study might use in-depth interviews or ethnography. So there is an influence of research design. There is an influence of data interpretation. Paradigms affect how data is integrated and the kinds of conclusions that could be drawn. For example, positivist research often looks for causal relationships. Constructivist approach seeks to understand the meanings behind human actions. And the critical and constructivist paradigms often emphasize ethical issues of power dynamics. So this influences how data is collected, for example, participatory methods, how findings are used to advocate social changes. This is a case of critical constructive paradigm. And implication for general ability application, this has to do with positivism and post-positivism, and mixed method approach. Pragmatism, I mentioned before, supports integration of both qualitative and quantitative approach, and this enables researchers to address complex problems with a more holistic view. And this approach is particularly useful in applied research, where the goal is to produce actionable real-world results. So here we can see we can mention some practical applications. And we talk about interpretivism paradigm. This can help researchers understand complex phenomena like human behavior or cultural practices. For example, study cultural practices, we will explore deeper cultural symbols, rituals, and traditions that hold meaning for participants rather than just documenting the practices themselves. And of course, contextual understanding and empathy inside the practices, because through methods like in-depth interviews, participant observation, here we can apply ethnography, researchers empathize with participants, which leads to richer, more nuanced interpretations of social phenomena. Complexity and nuance, because social phenomena are often complex and multidimensional. So we try to explore here this complexity without attempting to simplify it into universal laws. This results in more holistic insights that reflect the richness of human experience. There is a flexibility in research design. For example, as a researcher gains a deeper understanding of a cultural practice, this might shift their focus to explore how specific symbols or interactions influence group cohesion or identity. And understanding a change in fluidity, human behavior is not static, construction of knowledge by engaging with participants' perspectives and interpretations. Researchers, they help doing what? Produce knowledge that is both informed by and relevant to the lived experience of the people being studied. And for example, and again, another example, we talk about power and identity. An interpretivist researcher who studies workplace dynamics focuses on how employees of different social statuses interpret their roles, challenges, or achievements within the organizational structure. So another case of a critical paradigm which affects researchers' understanding of subjective experiences. For example, in healthcare, critical research on media may uncover, for example, critical, where is it here? Okay, it's not here. Okay, I can give it. We talk about the critical paradigm now. Critical research may show how marginalized groups are misrepresented or underrepresented, challenging stereotypes and advocating for more inclusive narratives. So this leads to a shift in power from the researcher to participants. They can expose structural inequalities. For example, critical research might investigate how the education system privileges certain students based on race or socioeconomic status, identifying reforms that can make education more equitable. An example might include researchers working with grassroots organizations to develop strategies for combating housing discrimination or supporting labor rights. And we know that real-world changes often result when critical research provides the evidence and frameworks needed to drive advocacy efforts and public policy changes. So we talk about how the critical theory helps with influencing policy institutional change, how this fosters flexibility and critical consciousness, how this connects local struggles to global context. I can give another example of real-world change. What is an example? In the field of critical race theory, these scholars in this field have highlighted the persistence of systemic racism in legal systems, education, or other social institutions. So their work has informed social movements like Black Lives Matter, which have pressured governments and institutions to enact policies aimed at reducing racial disparities in policy, housing, and education. So here, this is what we explained about critical theory, that the critical paradigm is deeply engaged in addressing social inequalities. It's about critiquing, it's about challenging existing power structures and producing knowledge which is aimed at transforming society. Now, on the other hand, constructivist approach, we want to explore step by step in healthcare what is happening here. Patients' experiences, for example, with illness or treatment may vary significantly, and a constructivist researcher would explore how different individuals interpret their health and medical care. So here, in this framework, the constructivist framework, we prioritize the subjective experiences of participants. students learning in education, students learning experience, perspectives on teaching methods and interactions with educators are explored to understand how they construct knowledge and meaning in the classroom. Contextualized understanding. The researcher might examine how, for example, in healthcare, how a patient's cultural or community background influences the experiences of illness, their trust in medical professionals, or their adherence to treatment protocols. In the education sector, researchers may explore how a student's family or social expectations and peer interactions influence the learning processes and engagement with the curriculum. Enter rejection of universal truths because, for example, researchers in healthcare would avoid making broad claims about how all patients experience a particular disease, focusing instead on understanding variations in patients' personal experience of illness and care. And correspondingly, we could say in healthcare, but rather than concluding in education, rather than concluding that one teaching method is best for all students, constructivist researchers might examine how different students experience different teaching strategies aiming to tailor approaches to the needs of diverse learners. And in healthcare, patients may be involved in the design interpretation of the research process, contributing their own insights to help shape the understanding of healthcare practices, so collaborative nature of research. In education, for example, teachers and students may work alongside the researcher to examine learning experiences. Interviews with patients about their illness experiences or ethnographic studies in hospitals help to uncover how individuals make sense of their health in relation to their personal lives. In education, on the other hand, researchers might conduct case studies or classroom observations or in-depth interviews with students and teachers to understand the process of knowledge construction in learning environments. And also, we talk about interpretive nature of findings because researchers try to interpret the patient's narratives to understand how they view their illness and care, acknowledging that these interpretations are subjective but may vary across different patients. Of course, about ethics, a researcher's own beliefs about health or illness may influence how they interpret patient experiences. Why? Because constructivist researchers strive to remain self-aware and transparent about these influences. In education, researchers reflect on how their own experiences as educators or learners may shape their understanding of students' learning experiences. So these things are very important. Now, we talk about social issues and policies through critical or post-positivist lens in policy making. This has profound implications because it challenges traditional approach. It offers alternative ways of understanding social problems. So policies which are developed through this lens would focus on equity and justice, particularly for oppressed groups or marginalized groups. So it would push policymakers to interrogate whose interests are being served and encourage more inclusive and participatory policymaking processes. In education policies, for example, a critical lens would question whether standardized testing benefits all students equally or whether it reinforces existing inequalities based on race, class, or socioeconomic background. Another example is in public health policy, a post-positivist approach might emphasize the value of local knowledge and lived experiences in shaping health interventions rather than relying only on universal top-down approaches. So policymaking under this lens would reject one-size-fits-all solutions and instead embrace context-specific adaptive policies that recognize the diversity of experiences and social realities. A critical lens also would challenge zoning laws or real estate practices that contribute to gentrification or segregation, focusing instead on creating affordable housing, but actively counters such patterns. And policy processes would likely include more participatory mechanisms, such as community-based research or direct engagement with marginalized groups. So this would lead to policies that better reflect the needs and desires of those most affected by social problems, potentially resulting in a more equitable and just outcomes. For example, criminal justice reform, this could mean actively involving formerly incarcerated individuals in shaping policies about prison reform or rehabilitation, valuing this way their lived experiences and knowledge. And we mentioned about climate policy, rather than positioning scientific knowledge as the only valid form of understanding, a post-positivist approach might integrate indigenous knowledge systems that have a long-standing relationship with environmental sustainability. So this would make policymakers more transparent about their assumptions, more self-critical about their own biases, and this will encourage the use of deliberative democratic processes where multiple perspectives are debated and considered, leading to more robust policy solutions. Greater emphasis on social justice and transformation, because in labor policy, critical lens might advocate for not just minimum wage increases, but for universal basic income or a living wage that fundamentally alters the economic system. Continuous reflection, because in social welfare programs, for example, this would mean continuously refining support structures based on feedback from recipients to better address poverty, housing instability, or employment. And intersectionality, because, for example, you mentioned healthcare policy, intersectional analysis might reveal how women of color face compounded challenges due to both racism and sexism, leading to more tailored healthcare interventions. So this viewing social issues through a critical or a post-positive lens shifts the focus of policymaking advocacy from simply managing or ameliorating social problems to understanding and transforming the underlying power structures and inequities that give rise to them. Now, we can see what are the practical considerations now and the steps. I selected an example from the healthcare sector. So here, for example, positivism. The positivist approach, we said it is rooted in the belief that reality is objective and measurable. So researchers can develop interventions based on empirical evidence that can be tested, replicated, and applied broadly across different population settings. So how they can do this effectively? Clear hypothesis formulation, the first step. Positivist research begins with a well-defined hypothesis or a research question that seeks to uncover generalizable truths about cause-effect relationships. In healthcare, researchers can formulate a hypothesis about the effects of an intervention on specific outcomes, such as the impact of a new drug, on reducing the risk of heart disease, or the effectiveness of a rehabilitation program in improving patient mobility. So the question, clear hypothesis formulation, does a specific exercise regimen reduce the risk of falls among elderly patients? Next, the use of randomized controlled trials. These are the gold standard for positivist healthcare research because they allow for high internal validity, reducing bias and confounding variables. So researchers randomly assign participants to either an intervention group or the control group. By controlling variables and ensuring randomization, they can define whether observed effects are due to the intervention itself rather than other factors. So wide applicability is achieved by ensuring that the study is conducted on a representative sample of the target population, allowing the results to be generalized to a larger group. For example, testing a new drug to treat diabetes by assigning participants randomly to either receive the drug or a placebo. Next step, To enhance the external validity of their findings, positive researchers must ensure the study includes a large and diverse sample representative of the population they wish to apply the intervention to. In healthcare, this might mean recruiting participants from various age groups, ethnic backgrounds, geographic regions, or different healthcare settings. That could be from hospitals for clinics. Large sample sizes also increase the statistical power of the study, making the results more reliable to a wider population. For example, conducting a multi-center trial for a new vaccination program, recruiting participants from hospitals across multiple countries to ensure diversity. And standardized data collection, of course, standardized measurement tools that could be validated scales and diagnostic tools or biomarkers to ensure to measure outcomes such as patient health or treatment effectiveness or disease progression. By using these standardized tools, researchers can compare results across different studies or populations, contributing to the reproducibility of their findings. For instance, using a standardized pain scale to measure pain levels across different pain groups in pain management studies. Of course, we talk about quantitative data, statistical analysis. So that could be regression analysis, t-test, chi-square test to analyze the effectiveness of an intervention, identify any causal relationships between the intervention and health outcomes. So this data-driven approach provides strong evidence for whether intervention works and to what extent, which is crucial for widespread applicability. When using statistical analysis to define if a reduction in hospital admissions is significantly associated with implementation of a new care coordination program. The focus of causal relations, this is important because here, by identifying clear causal links, researchers can create interventions that are evidence-based and likely to produce desired outcomes when they are applied in different settings, demonstrating, for example, that a smoking cessation program directly leads to lower rates of lung cancer by controlling for other factors like diet or exercise. This is an example how a smoking cessation program is directly related to other factors like diet or exercise, a lower rate of cancer. So all these aspects, along with replication, reproducibility, publishing the detailed methodology of a clinical trial for a new medication so that other hospitals or clinics can replicate the study, a clinical trial that demonstrates the effectiveness of a new blood pressure medication, for example, could lead to its recommendation in global hypertension treatment guidelines or generalization to broader populations. And meta-analysis thematic reviews, because another way that researchers can design interventions with wide applicability is by conducting meta-analysis thematic reviews within the positivist approach. How? By aggregating data by multiple studies, they can increase the generalizability of the findings. For example, a meta-analysis of various studies on the effectiveness of telemedicine for chronic disease management, leading to global recommendations for integrating telehealth into healthcare systems. And evidence-based guidelines and protocols, for example, clinical guidelines can show that a specific screening method significantly reduces the incidence of colorectal cancer, leading to its inclusion in national screening programs. So this way, researchers can ensure that the interventions have wide-ranging applicability by collaborating with medical associations, health policymakers, and regulatory bodies to translate findings into formal guidelines. So development of evidence-based guidelines, standardized treatment protocols that can be widely adopted in healthcare settings. And now we talk about pragmatism and how this can contribute to solving real-world problems in business now, or again, the public health. For example, here, researchers might combine quantitative methods like surveys to gather measurable data on customer behavior and qualitative methods like interviews to understand customer experiences and perceptions, helping businesses craft more effective strategies. Pragmatism emphasizes solutions that are actionable and relevant. For example, talk about health, combining statistical models for disease trends with qualitative insights from patients or healthcare providers to better understand the context behind health behaviors or system challenges. Flexibility, pragmatism, it's about flexibility. So in business, for example, a study may begin with a quantitative survey to gather broad customer data and then move to qualitative focus groups to explore deeper insights about customer preferences. So this combination of methods ensures a comprehensive understanding of the problem. Mixed methods on public health, researchers might use quantitative epidemiological data to assess disease prevalence and qualitative interviews to uncover community perceptions of healthcare access or vaccine hesitancy. Its problem-centered approach in business, this could involve identifying operational inefficiencies and testing specific interventions to improve workflows or customer service. In public health, this might mean addressing pressing health issues like obesity or smoking by developing intervention programs that take into account the social, cultural, and economic realities of target populations. So here we need this pragmatic approach actually lead to clear, actionable outcomes that directly influence real-world decisions and actions. Of course, contextual understanding, tailored solutions, because a program to reduce smoking might look different in urban areas versus a rural one, as the factors influencing smoking behavior, social norms, access to healthcare may vary. So the research will combine here quantitative data on smoking rates with qualitative insights from community members to craft effective, culturally appropriate interventions. Collaboration. In business, this means engaging employees in the development of workplace interventions or working closely with customers to design new products. On the other hand, in public health, this could involve engaging community leaders and healthcare workers to ensure that interventions are feasible and may meet the needs of the population. And it's all about the real-world problems, of course, and real-time problem solving. In business, this means that research findings can quickly inform decision-making and be adapted as new information emerges, so rapid feedback. For example, a company might pilot a new marketing strategy based on research, gather feedback from the market, and then adjust its approach accordingly. In public health, the approach allows for rapid response to evolving health crises. That would be a disease outbreak, that could be an emergency vaccination campaign. By continuously gathering and integrating new data, adjusting strategies as needed to address emerging challenges. So why is pragmatic research particularly effective in applied settings? Because here solutions need to be tailored to specific contexts, and pragmatism encourages cross-disciplinary methods, enable business and public healthcare sectors to draw from various fields in order to understand and address complex issues more effectively. Research in education, there are another issue. Research in education can benefit from the interpretivist development paradigm. Because here, when we talk about curriculum development, we know that curriculum development is not just about creating a set of lessons or materials. It's deeply influenced by social, cultural, and historical context. So interpretivist research helps to explore how teachers, students, how educational communities perceive and experience curricula. This includes understanding how external factors, educational policies, social values, community norms shape the way the curriculum is implemented and received. Through interpretivist approach, like interviews or focus groups, researchers here can gain a better understanding of how teachers interpret and adapt the curriculum based on their own pedagogical perspectives. So this leads to more flexible and more responsive curriculum designs that align with the real-world experience of educators. So teacher-centered insights. And of course, student-centered approaches, because from a student perspective, the interpretivist paradigm helps uncover how students understand, engage with, and internalize the curriculum. So instead of treating students as passive recipients of knowledge, This approach views them as active participants who shape and construct their own learning experiences. So, cultural curriculum relevance, this is also useful for this, we ensure that this cultural element is inclusive. And in education, curriculum design is often a fluid and iterative process. So interpretivism encourages a reflective, flexible approach to curriculum development where feedback from both teachers and students is incorporated into ongoing improvements. Teacher professional development. So this provides a framework for studying how teachers develop professionally over time through their experience of reflections about teacher identity and agency, how to identify barriers to learning, so understanding students' resistance, and all these issues. So this paradigm offers rich, nuanced insights into teacher-student interactions and curriculum development by emphasizing subjective experiences, contextual factors, and the meanings that individuals attach to the learning environments. And another issue that critical paradigms is another paradigm help address real-world issues like poverty, racial inequality, environmental justice. I mentioned about the critical race theory, which examines how laws, policies, and social structures perpetuate racial inequalities. Critical perspectives on poverty go beyond individual blame. They try to examine how systemic issues like unemployment or educational access contribute to poverty. So here, this critical paradigm pushes for changes in policy that address the root causes of poverty, such as living wages or universal health care, educational equity. Environmental justice. Criminal environmental justice theory emphasizes how marginalized communities of the poor, racial minorities are disproportionately impacted by environmental degradation. So it advocates for policies that ensure equitable distribution of environmental benefits and protections. This paradigm helps to construct dominant narratives, empower marginalized communities, helps transform social norms, fosters critical consciousness, and of course promotes sustainability and long-term change. So here we need to challenge existing power structures and oppressive systems, to advocate for social justice, to empower communities and promote for a more sustainable society. So this we mentioned that the choice of research paradigm influences selection of our methodology also. In healthcare research, positivist might conduct a controlled early research mentioned before. Qualitative research methods are suited to the interpretivist paradigm. Critical research use a combination of qualitative methods. And pragmatism in healthcare, for example, we might use quantitative methods to measure the prevalence of the disease and qualitative methods to explore patient experiences with the treatment. Post-positivism. Post-positivist researcher, for example, studying job satisfaction, may use a qualitative survey to measure satisfaction levels and complement it with qualitative interviews in order to understand underlying factors influencing employee attitudes. Of course, researchers must examine specific factors when they select a paradigm, the nature of the research question, the research goals, the epistemological, ontological beliefs. For example, pragmatists are less concerned with the philosophical underpinnings and more focused on the practical outcomes of knowledge creation, the methodological fit, the scope and scale of the study. If the research problem is complex, it requires multiple perspectives. A pragmatic paradigm that integrates mixed methods could provide a comprehensive understanding. The context, of course, the social context, the theoretical contributions versus practical change. So this has to do with desired practical outcomes. If the goal is to contribute theoretical knowledge, then a positivist or interpretivist approach might be preferred. If, on the other hand, the research aims to bring about practical change, such as policy recommendations or social interventions, a critical or pragmatic paradigm might be more appropriate. So all these factors, resource availability, the flexibility, are important. And the epistemological stance, of course, of a researcher influences the design of a study. So this influences data analysis, data collection, our research question. Positivist will formulate questions like this: what is the effect of class size? Interpretivist, how do students experience learning in large classroom environments? The data collection, different in positivism, different in interpretivism, in positivism, and about the ontology, epistemology in mixed methods research now. Where is the mix here? I have. Okay, the type of research questions best suited for the interpretivism. I think we have explored this as a previous session. So here it's important, how can researchers decide whether to use a mixed methods approach? This is very important. When to use a mixed method approach? When we have complex research questions, when there is a need for comprehensive data, and of course, if we talk about regulation, I mentioned before, what is regulation is the combination of different methods. When we search about complementarity and in order to promote exploration and expansion. For data collection, we have explored this, I think, previous time. Pragmatic paradigm shapes the use of both qualitative and quantitative methods in real-world research because there's a focus on more practicality, methodological flexibility. And data analysis, again, each paradigm influences our data analysis, influences our assumptions, data type, data analysis methods, and the key focus. So everything depends on which research paradigm will we choose, will we select. And paradigm integration mixed method approach. Here, how can researchers effectively combine paradigms in mixed methods while at the same time maintaining the integrity of each paradigm core principles? It's important to maintain reflexivity, to develop, above all, a clear integration strategy, to adopt always an approach and a specific integration framework. For example, use mixed method integration framework, and use design with clear boundaries. The challenges that may arise when we integrate paradigms in research, this has to do usually with the logical tensions, or there are conflicting data interpretations, or there are ethical conflicts, where there are institutional constraints, where there's the complexity of designing, managing the great studies, where the philosophical incompatibility. So, we mentioned about policies. I think it's the most important role here, implication policy making. Implications in advocacy, this has to do with collective mobilization, radical transformation, post-positivist lens in policy making. This is evidence-based, reflexive, pluralistic solutions, collaboration, and dialogue. So thank you very much for your attention. And any question?
Yeah, yes, thank you. As usual, very, very detailed, a lot of tips, a lot of explanation, well articulated. So I'm very sure our audience, this is foundation level. I think today we have completed the foundation level, and next week we will be continuing on the intermediate, right? So intermediate level. So I have to see the topics. So we will post what is the next session. Okay. Normally our professional masterclass is on Thursdays. So if you don't see it on Thursday, you can always expect there's some technical issues, something serious. Otherwise, we are always on Thursdays at 6 p.m. IST. So, dear audience, we thank you so much for your time and your attention and your support. And again, I wish to thank Ambassador Professor Dr. Rania Lampu for this amazing, brilliant sharing. So thank you so much, and we'll meet again next Thursday.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.